Hello, it is Friday, July 17th here at Breaking Points Fridays. It's me and Emily. Emily, how are you?
I'm good, man. You're doing the soccer thing where you scream at the beginning of the show, which the people love. So if it's working, go for it.
I was screaming all last night at the TV when we were watching that beautiful Trump speech. Sorry, the rest of the Friday hosts, they had a Taco Bell party without us. And so it's just us here today.
It would actually be much more likely to be the other way around, to be fair.
Yeah, well, you know what? We're more Del Taco, aren't we? We're Del Taco conservatives. So,
Never once have I had Del Taco, I'm ashamed to say.
Wow. Try their cheeseburger. But anyways, we've got that's my order of Del Taco. We've got quite a show today. Setting aside the fast food anomalies, Trump gave a riveting speech that saved democracy in the nation. We're going to get into that with Shelby Talcott from Semaphore in just a minute. We also have some high T testosterone directives from Pete Hegseth. Got some more strikes in Iran with the U.S. and Iran trading strikes over control of the strait. And what else do we have? We might get into a little bit of Biden towards the end. But wow, Emily, we stayed up last night to cover Trump's big speech, his big announcement, which essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the election was stolen in 2020 by China.
Well, he was a little more, for example, in Playbook this morning, you could sense, Politico's Playbook, you could sense his aides breathing a sigh of relief because they didn't know how much he would be riffing and how much he would stick to the carefully constructed script. And Shelby can tell us more about this. But I think it was probably restrained, a restrained version of Trump. Still, though, arguing there was a vast international conspiracy to tamper with American elections starting in 2020. He talks about how Maduro sought to change vote tallies in Venezuela. That was one of his big points. It was not about the United States. It was supposed to kind of augment his point about how these electronic voting machines can be tampered with. And his argument was that Maduro had tried to do it. His argument then was also that China had tried to interfere on behalf of Joe Biden in 2020 and that the FBI slow-walked. By the way, if they were doing that in 2020, it would have been under Donald Trump's first administration. But anyway, that the FBI slow-walked an investigation into Michigan Democrats trying to have some type of voter interference scheme. He said the CIA, or he said the deep state, tried to cover up China's election interference and immediately dumped a bunch of documents. Like, Griffin, I went to the White House website as the speech was happening, and there were zip files. Like on the website, they created a website for this speech, and there were 4 points, and every single one of them came with its own zip batch of documents, which people have been piecing through. Some are rather amusing, some are a bit more serious, but he's trying to create this idea that there is some vast international conspiracy that the American deep state and the media is in on to hurt him at the ballot box, and that elections are insecure. And he did a big plug for the Save America Act, of course, at the end of the speech. So my read on it is that just politically, you have a president his frustration is clearly boiling over. And Griffin, on a production level, you rarely see such an L from Trump. Like, the staging was off. And why am I mentioning that? Because again, I think it just speaks to him being beyond frustrated and starting to spiral a bit. Like, inflation is really stubborn because of the Iran war. In some sense, because of the Iran war, obviously, the Iran war has been intractable for him, stubborn, dare I say, and his numbers are showing it. And clearly he's frustrated. Plus, he can't get Congress to pass his signature piece of legislation. So it felt like he was frustrated. You joked before we came on air that it was giving Joe Brandon. And
he's Brandoning in real time.
It was giving Brandon a little bit. Like, the lighting was really harsh. The mic was so hot. Like, it made him sound really hoarse, and it made him sound just weird. And the staging was off kilter. Like, you had this gold curtain covering most of the backdrop. Yeah, you can see it here. It's not in this clip. I think Fox zoomed in on the shot. I was watching it on the White House feed. And the White House feed, you got the white wall behind it, so it was off center. So anyway, let's take a listen here.
That's probably the biggest crime. Yep.
Chinese government strategy against the United States was focused on undermining domestic confidence in the U.S. president. They wanted to just make you sound like your president wasn't so hot, when actually your president has done a great job. And they did everything possible to do exactly that.
China was trying to make him not hot when he was very much hot. Yeah, this was so boring, I have to say, just incredibly boring. And, you went to the website. I went to the website when he announced it, and it was very Obamacare because it said temporarily shut down.
Oh, really?
The website was not active when he first mentioned it. He mentioned quite a few websites too, actually. But yeah, we're supposed to go to a website and learn it all. And I guess we'll get more to this with Shelby, but I didn't see anything in these documents that actually ascertained his claims at all. Did you?
My quick read on it is that there's probably a kernel of truth in a couple of things. Like, for example, we do know that from Peter Strzok to whomever else, there were people inside of the FBI and the CIA. Like, the CIA was organizing signatures for that 51 former intelligence agents letter that got leaked to Natasha Bertrand at Politico saying the Hunter Biden laptop was fake. So obviously there were people who were using their intel positions to undermine Trump, and that happened during his first presidency. So it wouldn't be insane to me if the presidential daily briefing memos that he released, which are highly redacted, so I don't think they're conclusive at all, but if those were reflective of some real effort to keep intel about Chinese election interference away from him. It wouldn't surprise me if that had happened. And it also wouldn't surprise me, the stuff about the Michigan voter registration thing wouldn't surprise me. We saw that happening in weird ways in 2020 across the country, but that doesn't amount to a vast international conspiracy to install Joe Biden into office. So the scale and scope of it, I think, are the big question, is what I would say. So I think we should bring in Shelby to tell us how people inside of the White House are reacting to this. Shelby Talcott of Semaphore joins us now. Thank you, Shelby, for being here and for staying up late to cover the speech last night so that you could cover it, of course, for your own publication, but also here on Breaking Points.
More importantly, for Breaking Points.
Yes,
so much more
Sorry, Ben.
Yes, sorry, Ben. But let's get into the reaction I've seen so far. Some of the kind of Beltway rags, as we call them, in the biz, Shelby, saying that the White House is breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief right now because people didn't know to what extent Trump would be riffing in his big primetime address last night. It looks like he's stuck pretty closely to the script, but I don't know. Can you give us what you're hearing from your sources about what the expectation for the speech was and then their reaction to the reality?
So Republicans writ large, I think, were really nervous ahead of this speech because, as we know, the president has been focused for years on the 2020 election. We're getting into the midterms. There was a real concern that if the president came up last night and said the 2020 election was stolen, yada, 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 that was going to really set them back. And so I actually think for a lot of Republican lawmakers, this speech could have gone a lot worse. He did really stick to the script. John Solomon told reporters afterwards at the White House that every single word of this was reviewed by the CIA. So the administration was taking sort of the legal aspect of this, I think, pretty seriously. And it's notable that the president didn't go off script because, this is maybe the third time ever that he has stayed on script. And so that's really unusual. And I think speaks to just kind of how focused the administration was on what they can say and what they can't say.
So what were the big takeaways? Because from my layman's experience, it seemed like he was insisting that China in some way affected the 2020 election, but then the documents revealed on the website, according to multiple outlets, don't really say that. What do these documents posted on the website actually say?
Yeah, so there were several documents, and I think the big takeaway for me is that, when you heard the president's speech, he was sort of, I think, insinuating a lot more than the actual documents say. So the documents do note this sort of push from China, but we've also known that for a really long time. The administration knew that during the first term. That wasn't necessarily new, and they didn't go so far as to say China did affect the 2020 election, right? And then there was the Venezuela aspect, which I thought was really interesting, where the president was talking about this alleged plot by the Maduro regime to influence Venezuelan elections. And the Trump administration believes that that has sort of vulnerabilities for the U.S. elections. But again, the actual documents that the administration posted don't necessarily back that up. They don't go as far as the president was going. And so for me, the takeaway was that the president sees a lot of these documents as sort of proof of his 2020 stolen election claims, but the actual documents don't go as far as the president is going. But what I also thought was really interesting from the actual speech is we've heard Trump directly say the 2020 election was stolen, et cetera, for years now. And I thought he was much more couched in his analysis. And you could see how the administration was trying to frame this as this is all about looking forward. This is all about election integrity, even as all of the documents that were being released were talking about past elections.
And specifically on that timeline, Emily, I just had one more follow-up on
please.
this. So China, according to Trump, not these documents, China steals the election in 2020. But then now that they've accessed and are successfully hacking our elections, then they allowed Biden to win. So what is but then they allowed Trump to win again in 2024. So what's the logic there?
Yeah, I think that that's an example of sort of the president looking at maybe one specific aspect and coming to a conclusion that the documents don't necessarily conclude, and then kind of just ignoring the rest in his mind. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And that does appear like what it's looking like to me so far is a question of scale that he wants to allege. There's this vast international conspiracy, and what the documents show is probably some modest attempts that aren't entirely surprising to the intelligence world. And there's this DHS review we should talk about as well. Trump says his Department of Homeland Security did a big review of voter registration rules and found, I think it was like 278,000 non-citizens had been registered to vote in California, New Jersey, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. The states are already pushing back on that. But Griffin, I wanted to see if we could just roll some tape here of a couple of the clips. Let's go with the votes clip here.
Put together, these disclosures reveal an election system so broken and so vulnerable that no one can possibly defend it. It is not defensible.
Okay, and let's also then, Griffin, play the Venezuela clip just so folks get a taste of what was happening. At one point, Shelby, he blamed the media. We'll get your take on that, too.
Many people have questioned whether it could actually be possible to electronically manipulate vote totals or change election results on these terrible machines. Today, we are releasing documents that show the CIA obtained reporting of a specific plot to do a big number in favor of the corrupt Maduro regime in Venezuela. And that's exactly what happened, conspiring to digitally rig their own country's elections in 2020, and that's what they did. This reporting included precise details about methods to regime develop to digitally alter vote totals in ways that could not be detected even with an audit, no matter how deep they went. This intelligence underscores why we must take urgent action to ensure that our own system can never, ever be hacked or compromised like it was in the past. The fourth set of
So that's really interesting, the way he finished the last point there, Shelby, because it's obviously giving Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, but he's very much different. He's much more restrained, obviously, than they were. But in this big speech, he's talking about, I think he might have even started with this point about how it was proven by Maduro, allegedly, that you could tap into the electronic voting machines, which is that he was changing, that Maduro was trying to change vote tallies electronically. And Trump at the very end there said, it's been proven that it can happen. And then he very carefully says, we know our elections have been corrupted. So is this an effort to kind of walk the line between the 2020 wildness and what our intelligence actually shows? Is any of this from Maduro possibly, now that he's been imprisoned in the Southern District of New York. There have been conversations about, or Delcy Rodriguez, obviously, who is now basically being told what to do by Secretary Rubio per reporting. Like that seemed like maybe the riskiest part of the speech.
Yeah, and I think that my understanding is that this came from sort of a CIA discovery, not necessarily from Maduro himself post-arrest. Of course, I'm sure that they're talking to Maduro, and maybe we'll learn more. And I'm sure that they have asked him about this because Trump is so focused on it. But I did think that language that he used was really interesting. And I think it just goes back to my earlier point of this was a very carefully reviewed speech. And I remember talking to Trump administration officials when they were on the campaign trail, and a lot of them sort of understood that they weren't going to be able to get Trump to stop focusing on the 2020 election, but hoped that he would. And so there has been sort of this years-long acknowledgement among at least some of the administration officials that this is not necessarily the best thing for the president to focus on, but we can't get him to not focus on it. So let's try to figure out a way to work around it. And I think this is sort of the first time that you're seeing that they've actually been able to get him to kind of walk around the 2020 stolen election claims instead of, hurtling straight through it.
Okay, so it's kind of like a participation trophy that he's getting here. That's nice. He was also talking about the SAVE Act. Can we talk about the SAVE Act for a second here? He mentioned that quite a few times, and that's to secure our elections ahead of the midterms. But kind of feels like the midterms are already here. That if they even pass this SAVE Act, it would probably not be implemented in time for the midterms. How is he thinking about all of that? And are Republicans hoping that he also kind of drops that? And what's the popularity amongst the GOP in terms of this SAVE Act?
Republicans are past the point, I think, of hoping that he's going to drop it because he very clearly isn't. And this, for people who don't know, the SAVE Act has been a focus of the president's for a few months now. And he's actually held up other legislation, bipartisan legislation, in order to try to get it passed. And so this is something that he has been sort of acutely focused on, regardless of the fact that lawmakers have come to him and said, we don't have the votes to be able to do this. And so ostensibly, I think that the speech was an effort to get Republicans to pass the SAVE Act because the president's thinking was, I'm going to present all of this evidence to show that our elections allegedly aren't secure enough, and that will change some of these lawmakers' minds, and then this piece of legislation that I want will get passed. That was sort of the whole background reasoning behind this primetime address. I don't know that it's going to work, right? We talked to a lot of Republicans beforehand. We talked to Republicans afterwards. I think people are pretty set in their beliefs at this point about the SAVE Act. And there's no path right now to breaking a filibuster in the Senate either, which the president has called for.
Well, and Shelby, I'm sure you saw this Daily Caller report at the time that John Thune, in a closed-door meeting of Senate Republicans, basically said, according to multiple sources, that there are some senators who just hate Trump so much that they will refuse to support the Save America Act. And the reason I put this up on the screen is that I'm curious for your take on the genesis of this speech. Is this something that is rooted in Trump's frustrations with Senate Republicans about the SAVE Act? Is this him genuinely concerned about the midterm elections, which he's also said he doesn't care about, and he's not on the ballot? So is this him trying to claw his way out of where the numbers have gone over the course of the Iran war? Gas prices still hanging pretty high, could go higher because the MOU blew up, basically. What was this coming from? Why did this have to happen last night? Why did he decide to make it a primetime address? What was the thinking, as best as you can tell, behind it?
So the big reason why it's happening now, I will say, is because the president appointed acting director of national intelligence, Bill Pulte, a few weeks ago. And one of his directives from the president was, I want you to go in there. I want you to declassify all of this stuff from past elections regarding election integrity. And so that was a direct directive for Bill Pulte. And so he went in and on day one started trying to do that. And so that's, I think, the timeline wise, why you're seeing it all of a sudden sort of seemingly randomly come up. But I also think that the president's thinking on this is he wants to pass the Save America Act first and foremost. And I think it's less about the midterms, which he has grown to care about more than he did a few months ago, and more about his focus, his continued focus on the 2020 election.
Interesting.
What signals that he is caring more about the midterms now? I mean, he's been quite rambunctious with this Iran war, and that seems to not be going well. The economy, gas prices. What was the moment that signaled to you that he's actually cared or worried about the midterms now?
I get that sense from people who are close to him inside and outside the administration who have admitted to me in prior months that he is not as focused as they would like him to be on the midterms. And so they have argued that they've seen a little bit of a shift. And I say a little bit. It's not like he is, that is the only thing he's focused on, right? He's still very much focused on his legacy. He's still very much focused on foreign policy, despite lawmakers urging him to just ignore all of that and talk about the economy and try to get gas prices down. But I think that they sense that over the past few months, he's had some wins, and that has gotten him more interested in the midterms than he was prior. I think originally his thinking was, and he said this out loud, was, well, every time if a Republican is in office, we do poorly in the midterms. If Democrat is in office, they do poorly in the midterms. So he was kind of like, what's the point? And I think that the advisors close to him who care really a lot about the midterms have been able to convince him at least a little bit that it is actually important.
And Shelby, finally, he implicated NBC and I think ABC News in some plot and threatened to revoke their licenses, or at least he said they should have their licenses
because
revoked
they didn't
at one point. And at one point, by the way, or I should say overall, it did seem like the speech was a bit low energy, and it did feel kind of off kilter for a man like Trump that, like, love him or hate him, his skill is television. He schedules his primetime address, and it just felt weird for Trump. But that we shouldn't downplay, I guess, the severity of what he was alleging and the directions he did go in at certain points, talking about potentially revoking media licenses. It's a threat that he's made over the last 10 years. But Shelby, why are you complicit in this, and why do you hate America?
Oh, that's my question.
I'm trying to get out of here. Someone's going to deceptively clip this.
Yeah, that's right. We should. No, we will not do that. But how serious was that moment? And is that also reflecting anything? I guess it's probably not new. He's been doing this over the last 10 years. But I don't know. To me, he just seemed really frustrated, more so than usual in that speech last night.
Yeah, it's not new, but also this term you have seen him actually act on some of these threats against media companies and against media individuals. So I would take it pretty seriously, because this is something that he has grown increasingly frustrated about. As much as he has this sort of relationship with the press where he'll answer our calls and he'll, attack a reporter and then talk to them in private and act like nothing's wrong. He has grown really, really frustrated overall with the media. And you've seen that. You've seen that in how he has directed the DOJ to go after reporters. You've seen that in the way that Brendan Carr is operating on that side of things. And so I would take that threat seriously. And I do think that there is a growing frustration from him, because he feels like nobody is taking these claims seriously, that really he's one of the only people that is still focused on it.
Well, so it's very lonely at the top. And speaking of media companies not taking it seriously, Fox News was very, very careful in their reporting of this speech. I think they're still feeling the sting of the Dominion lawsuits. I think they hear election integrity and they feel trauma triggers from that. So Fox News, I don't know if you caught any of their coverage, but they were very, very careful to say that even they cannot confirm any of the allegations in the speech. Your reaction to that?
It doesn't surprise me after the lawsuit. And I think that's the reason why a lot of the networks were reluctant to air it live, because you knew that it was going to be about elections and you just don't know what the president is going to say. And he does have a track record of saying things that aren't backed up by the information that we have. And so I think a lot of the networks took this as, a precaution. I'm sure that they talked to their lawyers who said, listen, this is just not worth it. We'll air portions of it after the fact. We'll talk about it, et cetera. But Fox is in an interesting position, right? Because they are a conservative leading news outlet that the president watches a lot. But I thought it was really telling that they were so careful in how they were describing his allegations and noting that they were not able to independently verify it. That came straight from the lawyers, I'm sure.
And
finally,
Emily sorry, go for it.
Oh, go for it, Griffin.
I was just going to say, Emily also mentioned that he was off kilter, but that's because he didn't have his favorite teleprompter operator.
No. Yeah, possibly. This is what I was going to say. I'm vindicated.
I think it was a new guy.
The clips that we...
It was
go
a new
for it,
guy.
Shelby. So this teleprompter operator who has now been implicated in a Kalshi trading situation, and they're trying to maybe get like a settlement where he just says he won't do it again and pays restitution. He'd been with Trump for 10 years, Shelby? So you can tell us now, he had a new guy doing the prompter last night?
Yeah, so Caroline Levitt confirmed that the individual who was the subject of this investigation, who was placing bets, and I think he got like $100,000, which I don't know if that's worth ruining your entire life over. That's a question for another day. She confirmed that he is on unpaid administrative leave. And so he was not operating the teleprompter last night.
Well, the clips that we've shown so far, this has absolutely nothing to do with anything. But the clips that we've shown so far were zoomed in by the networks. I think we were showing Fox clips. And what you saw on the White House feed was different. It was completely off center. And it's driving me nuts.
You can see the white at the end.
Yes. And Shelby, it's just, again, it's a small thing. It means absolutely nothing.
You care so much about this. It's so funny.
I'm just saying, for Trump, that's weird. He never lets that stuff happen. It
is really interesting because, as we all know, Trump is a performer at heart. He did television for years. And over the years, people have talked about how obsessed he is with how things look, right? He talks about his administration officials being out of central casting. He likes how people look. He will sit down before an interview and there's clips of him out there. There'll be a water next to him and he'll say, no, let's put this on this side. And then he'll say, okay, actually, let's move it back.
He knows down to the lighting. He actually will control the lighting. He'll say the lighting should be like this, you should have it on this number, this warmth. He actually is that detailed about these sorts of things. You saw him
at he recently was interviewed by NBC and it was downpouring rain and whatever structure they were in, I think was entirely metal. And he was so frustrated by the noise of the rain, he ended the interview. And I think that was part of the reason why, was because there were all these technical logistical issues. And for him, that doesn't compute.
And
fascinating.
This teleprompter guy, he went down for making $100,000, which I shouldn't be a lot more than that if you know the words that are coming up. These are somehow very conservative bets to me. I think if the speeches are going to continue to be this boring and lethargic, bring that guy back. Let's get the old guy back in there, okay?
Let's have some fun.
Shelby, any final thoughts?
That's it from me.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Where can people find your work? Obviously, Semaphore. And where can people find you online?
I am on X. I still almost said Twitter, at Shelby Talcott. And then I post on my Instagram, which is just SB Talcott.
Very nice.
Everyone go Shelby. She's one of the best.
Follow Shelby, and we'll, of course, see you soon for potentially more election integrity or whatever else happens this year with the midterms. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.